I am 68 years old, and for the past 4 decades, I thought I understood life. How wrong I was. My name is Patrick Hungate, and until recently, I thought my greatest trials were behind me. The death of Evelyn, my wife, turned my world upside down, leaving a scorched wasteland where there used to be a blooming garden of our life together. Evelyn passed away quietly in her sleep after a 3-year battle with cancer. The doctors said we were lucky. She wasn't in agony at the end. Lucky. What an inappropriate word. I was alone in our big house on the outskirts of Seaford, where everything reminded me of her, the antique clock we'd bought at a flea market in Portland, the collection of porcelain birds on the mantelpiece, even the garden tools in the shed still holding her fingerprints. After 45 years of marriage, the loneliness was unbearable. I wandered through empty rooms talking to my wife's ghost and gradually lost touch with reality. It was then that Ethan, our only son, suggested I move in with him and Winnie. "Why would you want to suffer alone in this huge house, Dad? We have plenty of room, and the grandkids will be happy to see you every day." I hesitated. All my life, I'd been an independent person. Working as a financial analyst had taught me the value of freedom and personal space. But the longing and emptiness pushed me toward a decision I now regret every day. Ethan insisted I sell my house to Evelyn and me. "Too many memories, Dad. You need to move on." The rational part of me knew he was right, but my heart was breaking as I signed the sale papers. I put most of the proceeds into safe investments, an old habit of a financier. The rest went into a joint account with Ethan, just in case, as I explained at the time. The move took place in mid-October last year. The day was clear but cool. Typical fall weather for Seaford. Ethan and his sons, my grandsons, helped move the few belongings I had decided to keep. Winnie met me on the doorstep of their 2-story home with a smile and a hug. "Welcome home, Patrick. We're so glad you'll be living with us." The first few weeks seemed idyllic. My room was on the first floor with a private bath, a rare luxury, as Winnie emphasized. I woke up to the sound of family hustle and bustle. Ethan getting ready for work at the local IT company, the twins Hugo and Harvey, who were turning 10, getting ready for school, and Winnie organizing all this chaos with the efficiency of a military strategist. In the evenings, we would gather around the big dinner table and discuss the day. The boys would share school stories, and I would tell my grandchildren about the days when computers took up entire rooms and phones were tied to the walls with wires. They laughed and called me Grandpa from the Stone Age. But gradually I began to notice little things that at first I put down to my own shyness. Winnie always spoke a little louder when it came to household expenses. "The electric bill this month is astronomical, and grocery prices have gone up again." As she did so, she would casually cast glances in my direction. By the end of the first month, these hints became more direct. "Patrick, you were a financier, right? You must have a nice pension," she said one day at dinner, stirring the sauce. "Sufficient for my modest needs," I replied evasively. "It would be fair for you to contribute to the family budget." "It's not cheap to maintain a house, after all." Ethan coughed awkwardly, but remained silent. His silence seemed to me to be a sign of agreement with my wife, and I offered to transfer a certain amount to their account each month. Winnie brightened, and something like relief flashed in her son's eyes. After that conversation, something changed. The thin ice that had been covering our relationship became more visible. Winnie began to advise me on how to spend my time. "Patrick, maybe you could pick up the boys from school. I need to make it to yoga on time." "Patrick, since you're home all day anyway, could you make dinner? I'm so tired at my online counseling sessions." Winnie worked as a psychologist, counseling clients via video calls. The irony of the situation didn't escape me. The person who is supposed to understand other people's emotions and needs was completely ignoring mine. Gradually, my list of chores expanded. Morning walks with the dog, cleaning, laundry, helping the boys with their homework. I didn't mind spending time with my grandchildren, but the rest made me feel like I was being used as free labor. Attempts to talk to Ethan alone always ended the same way. He listened, nodded, promised to talk to Vinny, but nothing changed. One day I asked him bluntly, "Son, are you happy in this marriage?" He flinched as if I'd hit him, and after a pause he replied, "Winnie and I have a wonderful family, Dad. It's just that she's very organized and practical. Someone has to keep things under control." In his eyes I saw that little boy who was always looking for approval, First mine and Evelyn's, now Winnie's. It pained me to realize that my son had never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. By Christmas, the tension in the house could have been cut with a knife. Winnie insisted that the holiday go according to her script, ignoring the traditions that Evelyn and I had honored for years. Instead of baking ginger cookies from my mother's recipe, she ordered all the sweets from a fancy bakery. Instead of letting me read Dickens's A Christmas Carol to my grandchildren, as I did for Ethan as a child, she turned them on a cartoon on a tablet. On New Year's Eve, an event occurred that opened my eyes to the true nature of our family idol. Winnie organized a party for her friends and colleagues. The house was filled with people I barely knew. I was introduced as Ethan's father, as if I had no identity of my own. Late one night, I overheard Winnie and her friend talking in the kitchen. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway. "So how's it living with your father-in-law under the same roof?" the friend asked. Winnie sighed with theatrical drama. "Honestly, it's a challenge. Of course, his pension and the money from the sale of the house come in handy, but he's so old, fashioned, always trying to meddle in the boys' upbringing, and Ethan lets him do it. Sometimes I feel like I'm living with 2 kids instead of one." "Why did you agree to this in the first place?" wondered her friend. "We didn't have a choice," Ethan insisted. "All that nonsense about family values and taking care of old people. Plus," uh, she lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "According to some of his papers I have seen, the old man has some decent savings. When he's gone, it'll all go to Ethan, and that means us." The blood rushed to my face. I quietly stepped back and went back to my room, where I spent the rest of the evening staring at Evelyn's picture. "What would you do if you were me, darling?" I whispered, but of course there was no answer. After the New Year's holidays, the situation worsened. Winnie no longer felt it necessary to hide her attitude toward me. One morning she put a list of household chores in front of me. "What's this?" I asked, even though I had already guessed. "Just so you don't forget what needs to be done today." "I know your memory isn't what it used to be at your age." She smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. There were 10 items on the list, ranging from walk the dog to make lasagna for dinner. "Winnie, I'm not your housekeeper," I said calmly. "Of course you're not. You're a member of the family. And in a family, everyone contributes. Ethan works, I counsel clients and take care of the kids, and you? Well, you have a lot of free time." That evening, I tried to have a serious talk with my son. We were sitting in the garage where he was fiddling with his old motorcycle, a hobby Winnie barely tolerated. "Ethan, I think your wife sees me as a burden, or at best, a source of extra income and free help around the house." He didn't look up from the bike. "Dad, you're exaggerating. Winnie is just a practical person. She wants everything to run like clockwork. Even if that clock is your father? Son, I don't mind helping with the grandkids or being involved in the household chores, but the way she talks to me, the way she plans to use my money." Ethan finally looked at me, and in his gaze I saw a mixture of guilt and annoyance. "What do you want me to say, Dad? That I picked the wrong woman? That my life isn't as perfect as you and Mom's was? I'm sorry, but I have obligations to my family." "And I'm not your family?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Of course you're family. But Winnie and the boys are. That's different. Look, I'll talk to her, okay? I'll ask her to go easy on me. But you try to understand her too. She's used to being in control." I nodded, realizing I couldn't get more out of him. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time, analyzing the situation like a professional financier, weighing the pros and cons. I realized that I was being used, but the pain of my son's betrayal overshadowed all rational thoughts. The following weeks turned into a cold war. Winnie kept leaving me to do lists, and I did the minimum necessary to keep the peace. She hinted at increasing my financial contribution. I pretended not to take the hint. Ethan tossed himself between us, trying to please both of us and succeeding at neither. The only outlet was the grandchildren. Hugo and Harvey, despite their mother's influence, retained their childlike spontaneity and sincere affection for me. We often played chess, a game Winnie considered outdated and useless for today's children. I told them stories from my youth, taught them the basics of financial literacy, and just listened to their childish chatter. One day Harvey asked me, "Grandpa, why does Mom always talk about you so weird when she thinks we can't hear?" "How weird?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Well, she tells Aunt Bella on the phone that you're a stubborn old man who doesn't understand his place. What does that mean? I patted my grandson on the head. It means that adults sometimes have different views on life, kid. But it doesn't change the fact that I love you and your brother more than anything in the world. Winnie found out about this conversation. Apparently, Harvey had naively told her. That evening, she came into my room without knocking. I'd rather you didn't discuss me with my children behind my back, she said icily. I wasn't discussing you, Winnie. Your son asked me a question, and I answered as neutrally as possible. In this house, I decide what and how I tell my children. I'm their mother, and I'm their grandfather. And unlike you, I don't say nasty things about you behind your back. Her face contorted with anger. You know what, Patrick? I've tried to be patient. I really have tried. But you're doing everything you can to make life difficult for our family. Maybe we'd all be better off if you found another place to live. At that moment, Ethan appeared in the doorway. From the look on his face, he'd heard enough. Vinny, you can't kick my father out. It's his house, too. I thought my son was finally taking my side, but the next sentence dispelled that illusion. Besides, we had an agreement. Dad helps us financially and with the kids, and we provide a roof over his head. It's only fair. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the sensitive boy that Evelyn and I had raised? When had he turned into this calculating man who spoke of his own father as a lucrative investment? Winnie crossed her arms over her chest. Then let him fulfill his end of the bargain in full. No half measures. If he lives here, he follows the house rules. My rules. They talked about me as if I wasn't in the room. At that moment, I realized I had reached the point of no return. My son's home had ceased to be a safe haven for me and had become a golden cage where I was no longer a beloved father and grandfather, but merely a useful resource. Lying in bed that night, I made a decision that would change all of our lives. I could no longer and would no longer live under the same roof with a woman who saw me only as a source of profit and a son who had betrayed all the values I had taught him. It was time to break out of that cage before it turned into a coffin. I thought things couldn't get any worse after our evening conversation with Vinny and Ethan, but I was wrong. With each passing day, the atmosphere in the house became more and more tense. Winnie no longer felt the need to hide her true attitude toward me, and Ethan continued to remain silent, avoiding direct conversation. At the beginning of March, an event occurred that finally convinced me of the need for decisive action. I was reviewing my bank statements on my tablet when Winnie suddenly glanced over my shoulder. "Oh, you have another account with a decent amount of money in it that you didn't tell us about," she remarked with feigned surprise. I turned off the screen, but it was too late. "Those are my personal savings, Winnie. Money I've been saving all my life." She sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table. "Patrick, I thought we were family. And in a family, there should be no secrets, especially financial ones. Ethan told me there was a substantial amount of money left over after the sale of your house. That money is for my old age and unexpected expenses," I replied, trying to speak calmly. "Everyone should have a financial safety cushion." Of course, she agreed with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "But you have to agree, now that the economy is so unstable, those funds could work more efficiently, like helping with home repairs or paying for college for the boys in the future." I looked her straight in the eye. "Winnie, I'm already contributing a significant amount to your family budget. The rest of my money will stay where it is." Her smile disappeared. "You know, Patrick, sometimes I think you don't realize your position. You live in our house, eat our food, use our facilities. And when it comes to actually helping the family, anything more than symbolic amounts, you backtrack." Symbolic amounts. I mentally calculated how much I'd transferred to them over the months. Almost a quarter of everything I'd gotten for selling the house. But to Winnie, they were only symbolic sums. "If you don't think my contribution is enough, maybe we should renegotiate our arrangements," I said, deliberately switching to "you" to show that I wasn't going to play her games of fake politeness anymore. "Great. Let's review. I'll prepare a calculation of all your living expenses, and we'll discuss it tonight when Ethan gets home from work." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving me with heavy thoughts. I realized that the conversation tonight was going to be difficult, so I decided to prepare myself. I opened my main account and transferred most of the funds to a reserve account that neither Ethan nor Vinny knew existed. Then I called my old friend and financial advisor, Randall Worth. Pat, buddy, haven't heard from you in ages. How's life with your son? Randall's voice sounded as energetic as it had 30 years ago when we worked together at the investment firm. Not as rosy as I'd like, Rand. Look, I need your advice. Confidential. I briefly outlined the situation, trying to be objective, though inside everything was boiling with resentment and frustration. That's a hell of a thing to say, Pat. Sounds like your sister-in-law doesn't see you as a person, but as an ATM on legs. She does. And worst of all, Ethan is completely under her thumb. I can't believe this is the same boy Evelyn and I raised. Randall was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, when my oldest fell under the influence of his first wife, I didn't recognize him either. It took a painful divorce for him to come to his senses. I hate to break it to you, but as long as Ethan lives with that woman, it's unlikely anything will change. His words confirmed what I already understood, but refused to acknowledge. What's your advice financially? I asked, turning the conversation to practical matters. First, close all joint accounts with your son immediately. From what you've told me, there's a risk your daughter-in-law will get to them as well. Second, check who's listed as beneficiaries on your will and insurance policies. If Ethan is listed directly there, you'd better make changes, like setting up a trust for your grandchildren with the stipulation that the money be paid directly to them when they reach adulthood. We talked for another hour or so, discussing various financial and legal aspects. Randall also offered to let me stay with him if the situation became unbearable. In the evening, when Ethan got home from work, Winnie organized a real meeting. She laid out some papers on the table with calculations and graphs. The boys were sent upstairs to do their homework. So, Winnie began in a businesslike tone, I've calculated the approximate cost of keeping your father in our home, taking into account utilities, groceries, depreciation of furniture and appliances, and moral depreciation. Moral wear and tear? I interrupted, not believing my ears. You seriously included that in the calculations? Absolutely. The stress a family goes through has a price. So if you add it all up and subtract what Patrick is already contributing, it turns out he still owes us a decent amount each month. I glanced at Ethan, expecting some kind of reaction, but he sat there with an absent look, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away. Vinny, I said, trying to keep my cool, I've already transferred you an amount equal to the cost of a small apartment, not to mention the fact that I spend every day tending to my grandchildren, cooking, cleaning, and doing a host of other things that, when measured against the market value of nanny and housekeeper services, cost a lot more than you think. That's different, she brushed it off. You're part of a family, and in a family, everyone helps each other. Ethan and I work to provide for everyone, including you. You help around the house because you have the time, and the financial contribution is a different story. So when it comes to household chores, I'm part of the family, but when it comes to money, not anymore? Winnie looked annoyed. You're turning everything upside down. We're offering you a simple choice. Either increase your financial contribution or find another place to live. It's only fair. I looked at my son. Ethan, what do you think? Is that your opinion too? He finally broke away from his thoughts and said uncertainly, Dad, I realize this sounds harsh, but we do have a lot of expenses. Mortgage, boys' school, cars. Winnie's right. Your help would really come in handy. My help? And what has it been for the last few months? I gave you a significant portion of the money from the sale of the house your mother and I spent a lifetime building, the house you grew up in, and that doesn't count. Ethan looked confused. Of course it counts. But it's not enough for all our plans. What plans? I asked, feeling the anger building up inside. Winnie answered instead. We want to expand the house, add another wing, and maybe get a lake house for summer vacations. And of course, a college for the boys. The best universities cost a fortune. I looked at them and couldn't believe what was happening. They were planning to use my money, earned through decades of hard work, for their whims without even consulting me. Have you considered that I might want to manage my money in my own way? Like setting up a trust fund for my grandchildren's education that no one but themselves can manage when they reach adulthood? Winnie turned pale. That would be extremely unwise. Ethan and I know better what our children need. How do you know what I need? I asked Ethan quietly. Son, look at me. Do you really think I should give you all my savings so you can build a new wing to the house? Or buy a summer house? Ethan finally met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw something that finally broke my heart. A mixture of greed and indifference. Dad, it's not what you think. We just want you to be a part of our family so we can all have a better life. Your money will help us all. No, Ethan. They'll help you and Winnie fulfill your ambitions. And what will I get? The right to continue living in this house where I'm seen as free labor and a walking ATM machine? I woke up the next morning with a clear understanding of what needed to be done. After waiting for everyone to leave, Ethan to go to work, Vinny to take the boys to school and then go about his business, I sat down at my computer and began methodically reviewing all of my financial assets. The first thing I did was close the joint account with Ethan, transferring the balance to my personal account. Then I contacted a lawyer specializing in probate matters and scheduled an appointment for the next day to make changes to the will. Rather than leaving everything directly to Ethan, I decided to set up a trust fund for the grandchildren with clear payment terms. Then I called several real estate agents to inquire about rental options for small apartments in Seaford. The prices were higher than I expected, but quite affordable. A realtor at Primrose offered to show me a couple of options the very next day. Having finished these things, I felt a strange relief. It was as if the heavy weight that had been weighing on my shoulders for all these months began to fade away. I was no longer a helpless victim of circumstance. I was taking control of my life again. When I returned to my son's house in the evening, I found Winnie waiting impatiently for me. Her face expressed poorly concealed anxiety. Patrick, where did you disappear to all day? We were worried. I held back a chuckle. I didn't think I had to account for my movements. I was on business. What business? Ethan said he couldn't reach you on your cell phone. I have the sound turned off during meetings. And Winnie, I'm entitled to my personal space and time. She narrowed her eyes. Of course you do. It's just odd that just today, when Ethan and I discovered the joint account was closed, you suddenly disappeared all day. So they'd already noticed. Well, that was to be expected. Yes, I closed that account. It's no longer needed. No longer needed? But we used it for family expenses. Exactly. And it seems to me that some of those family expenses had nothing to do with me. I prefer to handle my own finances. One evening as I was helping Harvey with his math homework, he suddenly asked, Grandpa, are you really leaving us? I flinched. Who told you that? I heard Mom telling Dad that you're leaving us and taking all the money. Taking a deep breath, I set the textbook aside and looked my grandson in the eye. Harvey, I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to live somewhere else, not too far from here. You and Hugo can come visit me anytime you want. And of course, I'm not taking all the money. I'm just handling my finances as I see fit. But Mom said that because of you, we won't be able to go to the lake this summer and build a pool in the backyard. I struggled to hold back a bitter chuckle. You see, my boy, it's a little more complicated than your mom can explain. But trust me, I'll always take care of you and your brother. It's just that sometimes adults need space from each other. I spent the next day looking at apartments. One of them, a small but bright and cozy studio in an old but well-maintained house near the center, appealed to me. I immediately put down a deposit and arranged to move in a week later. I met with a lawyer who approved my decision to set up a trust for my grandchildren and helped me draft a new will. Then I visited the bank, where I closed any remaining accounts that Ethan or Vinny could theoretically have access to and opened new ones at another bank. In the evening, Ethan came into my room. Dad, Winnie said you closed our joint account. Is that true? Yes, I did. Why? You're leaving us. I looked at my son carefully. His voice sounded not concerned for my well-being, but worried about the loss of financial support. It finally convinced me of the right decision. Ethan, let's be honest. You and Vinny see me not as a father and grandfather, but as a source of extra income and free labor. That's not the kind of relationship I want to have with my family. What are you saying? Of course we see you as a father. It's just that we have certain expectations. We thought you'd be happy to help us out financially since you live with us. Did you ever think that I might have hoped to find love and support here after my mom died? That I needed a family, not employers? Ethan looked confused. You're exaggerating, Dad. No one treats you like an employee. Really, what about the daily to-do list from Winnie? Or her talking behind my back about how I'm taking up space and not living up to expectations? Or your acquiescence to it all? My son couldn't find anything to answer. He sat with his head down, looking so small and lost in the moment that I even felt sorry for him. But I knew I couldn't go on living in this house pretending everything was okay. I found an apartment, Ethan. It's not big, but it'll be enough for me. Moving in a week. He looked up sharply. What, are you serious? Dad, we can talk things over. Find a compromise. What kind of compromise, son? I'll give you even more money and in return I get the right to continue living under this roof, tolerating your wife's neglect? No, thank you. I'm not that desperate yet. That night I was finally convinced that I had made the right decision. I was about to begin a new chapter in my life, a chapter in which I would live for myself and not serve other people's ambitions. The next few days passed in a strange state of suspended animation. I had already made the decision to leave, but I was still 4 days away from moving into my new apartment. Winnie defiantly ignored me, walking past me as if I were nothing. Ethan tried several times to start a conversation, but always reduced it to financial issues, which only strengthened my confidence in the correctness of my decision. I spent more time with my grandchildren, realizing that soon I wouldn't be able to see them every day. We played chess, read books, and I told them stories from my youth that they loved so much. Harvey and Hugo could feel the tension in the house, but like children, were more preoccupied with their daily routines: school, friends, video games. On Wednesday morning, 2 days before the move was scheduled to take place, I went down to the kitchen and saw that Winnie was already there. She was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and looking through some papers. When she heard my footsteps, she looked up and gave me a cold stare. "Good morning, Patrick," she said in a tone that was anything but kind. I nodded and headed for the coffee machine. Making myself a cup of strong espresso, I was about to head back to my room when Winnie suddenly spoke up. "We need to talk." I stopped and turned to her. "About what?" "About your leaving. Ethan said you found an apartment and planned to move in on Friday." "That's right." She set the papers aside and folded her hands on the table. "I think you're making a hasty decision." "We may have all been a little hasty." I didn't answer right away, wondering where she was going with this. Winnie never backed down unless she saw personal gain in it. "What's the matter, Winnie?" "Up until a week ago, you told me in direct text that I had to either increase my financial contribution or find another place to live. I chose the second option. Why are you changing your mind now?" She wrinkled her nose slightly when I switched to you, but held back. "Ethan and I discussed the situation and decided that we may have been too demanding. After all, you're family, and we're supposed to support each other." "Interesting," I remarked, sipping my coffee. "And this decision has nothing to do with the fact that I closed the joint account and blocked access to my finances?" Her smile became strained. "Of course it doesn't. Although I must admit, your unexpected financial decision has put some strain on our family budget. I'm sure you'll manage. Ethan has a good job, and you make a good living with your online counseling too. It's not just about the money," she paused as if choosing her words. "The boys will miss you. And so will Ethan. You're his only parent since Evelyn died, after all." I grinned. "It's odd that you only brought that up now that I was getting ready to leave. For the past few months, my position in this house has felt more like that of a servant than a beloved father and grandfather." "You're exaggerating. I was just trying to organize our lives so that everyone would be comfortable. Perhaps sometimes I was a little too pushy." "Pushy? You made me daily household to-do lists like I was your subordinate. You discussed with your girlfriends how I was taking up space and not living up to expectations. You manipulated my grandchildren into thinking it was my fault they weren't getting a pool in the backyard. And now you say you were just being pushy?" Winnie visibly tensed. "Okay, maybe I did overreact. But that's no reason to destroy the family. Let's start with a clean slate. Set some new rules that will suit everyone." I set the cup on the table and sat down across from her. "I'm listening." "What rules do you propose?" She perked up a little, sensing I was ready to dialogue. "First, Ethan and I will not bring up your personal finances again. That is entirely your business. Second, I won't give you to-do lists. You'll decide how and what you want to help with around the house. Third, We'll keep the family dinners together and other traditions you enjoy. Sounds good, I nodded. And what in return? She frowned slightly. What do you mean? Winnie, I've been around long enough to know no one changes their behavior for nothing, especially when money and power are involved. You want something from me. What is it exactly? She was quiet for a moment, clearly unhappy that I could see right through her. Okay, we're hoping you'll continue to contribute the same amount to the family budget as before, and maybe help with the down payment for the summer cottage on the lake we talked about. It will be a place for the whole family, including you. So there you have it. It's all about money again. And how much do you expect me to pay for that down payment? Not much, she made an uncertain gesture with her hand. About a third of the amount you got for selling the house. Ethan and I will take out a mortgage for the rest. I almost choked. A third of the sale of the house was considerably more than I'd already given them over the months. And this was what she called, not that much. Winnie, let's get this straight. You're offering me to stay in your house, continue to pay you monthly as if I were renting a room here, and give me a third of all my savings to buy a house that will be put in your and Ethan's name? And in return, you promise not to treat me like a servant? Am I understanding correctly? Her face flushed slightly. You're turning everything inside out. I'm offering you to remain a member of the family, to participate in our lives and our plans. Isn't that what you want? No, Vinny. I want to be a beloved father and grandfather, not an ATM machine on legs. And after everything that's happened in these months, I don't believe you're capable of seeing me as anything other than a source of money. She stood up abruptly, all pretense gone from her face. Fine. I tried to be reasonable, to offer a compromise. But apparently you are too stubborn and selfish to think of anyone but yourself. Selfish of me? After all I've given you? After all these months of humiliation and manipulation? Humiliation? What are you even talking about? We took you into our home when you were alone. We fed you, took care of you. And what did we get in return? Ungratefulness and accusations. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. This conversation was going nowhere. I don't think we have anything else to discuss. I'm moving in on Friday like I planned. No, Winnie cut off, her eyes narrowing. You're moving in today. Excuse me? You heard me. Either you agree to my terms and remain a member of this family, or you pack your bags and leave. Immediately, I couldn't believe my ears. You're kicking me out of my son's house? I'm protecting my family from toxic influences. Your behavior the last few days has been upsetting the kids and creating tension. Ethan is on the verge of a nervous breakdown over all of this. So yes, I am asking you to leave today, unless you are willing to be a part of our family on our terms. At that moment, Ethan walked into the kitchen. From the look on his face, he had heard the last part of our conversation. What's going on here? He asked, shifting his gaze from me to Vinny and back again. Your wife just gave me an ultimatum, I replied calmly. Either I give you a third of all the money from the sale of the house and continue paying monthly for the right to live here, or I have to leave. Immediately. Ethan frowned. Winnie, we agreed that I would talk to my father alone first. I was trying to be diplomatic, she parried, but your father has made it clear that he doesn't appreciate everything we do for him. He'd rather destroy the family than help us realize our dreams. I looked at my son, expecting him to at least take my side now, to protect me from this greedy, manipulative woman. But Ethan only flailed his arms helplessly. Dad, I understand that Winnie can be, sometimes, blunt, but she's right about one thing. We're a family, and a family should support each other. If you have the opportunity to help us with the lake house, wouldn't that be wonderful? Imagine how excited the boys would be to spend their summer vacations there. How we'll all get together on the weekends. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the sensitive, fair-minded boy that Evelyn and I had raised? When had he turned into this weak-willed man willing to betray his own father for material goods? Ethan, I said quietly, I don't mind helping the family. I've always helped you, with college, with the down payment on this house, with the wedding. But what's happening now isn't helping the family. It's extortion. You and Vinny don't see me as a father and grandfather, but as a source of funding for your ambitions. And you know what? I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I got up from the table and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Ethan asked with a note of panic in his voice. "To pack my things. Since your wife insists I leave immediately, I won't argue. But, but your apartment isn't ready yet. You said yourself you weren't moving in until Friday. I can stay at a hotel for a couple days, or I could call Randall." He offered to stay with him. "Randall? Your old coworker? Are you two still in touch?" I turned in the doorway. "Yes, Ethan, we are. Some friends stay friends for life. They don't abandon you when you're no longer useful to them." Winnie snorted. "Always knew you were prone to drama." "Well, go ahead and pack your things. Let's see how long you can last without our support." I didn't respond to this provocation and headed for my room. Strangely, I felt not anger or resentment, but rather relief. It was as if the heavy weight that had been weighing on my shoulders all these months was finally completely gone. The decision had been made, and now I could move on. In my room, I pulled out 2 large suitcases and began methodically putting things away. Clothes, books, personal documents, pictures of Evelyn and me together, a few memorabilia I had saved after selling the house, our wedding rings, which I kept in a small jewelry box. It all fit into 2 suitcases. It's amazing how few material things remain truly important toward the end of life. As I was packing, there was a quiet knock at the door. I expected to see Ethan, but it was Hugo standing on the doorstep. His eyes were wide open and a little frightened. "Grandpa, are you really leaving? Right now?" I knelt down to be level with my grandson. "Yes, baby. I have to move into my own apartment." "But Mommy said you're leaving because you don't love us anymore." His lower lip quivered. I felt everything inside clench with pain and anger. How could Winnie say that to a child? "Hugo, that's absolutely not true. I love you and Harvey more than anything in the world. It's just that sometimes adults need to live apart from each other. But that doesn't mean we stop loving each other. You can come visit me whenever you want. I'll have a separate room for you and your brother, with books and games." "Really?" His face brightened a little. "Sure. And you know what? My new apartment is right next door to that ice cream store you and Harvey love so much. We'll be able to go there every time you visit me." Hugo smiled weakly, but then turned serious again. "Why do you and Mom fight all the time?" "She says you don't want to help our family." I sighed. How do you explain complicated adult relationships to a 10-year-old without denigrating his mother? You see, Hugo, adults sometimes have different understandings of what helping the family means. Your mom and I just couldn't agree on that point. But those are our problems, and they have no bearing on how much I love you and your brother. Winnie appeared in the doorway. "Hugo, I told you not to bother Grandpa. Go help your brother pack his backpack for school." The boy gave me one last glance and reluctantly left the room. Winnie stayed behind, leaning against the door jamb. "You're really leaving right now," she said, and it wasn't a question but a statement. "Yes, you insisted on it yourself, remember? I thought you'd change your mind when you realized you had nowhere to go." I grinned. "You see, Vinny, unlike you, I plan my actions. I have options on where to go. And more importantly, I have the financial independence you've been trying so hard to undermine." She pressed her lips together. "You know, Patrick, I've really tried to make you feel like part of our family. But you've always kept yourself apart, as if you thought you were better than us. Maybe it really is better for you to live separately." "We've finally come to an agreement." I closed my suitcase and straightened up. "Tell Ethan I'll call him in a few days when I'm settled in the new place. And tell the boys that I love them, and I'll be looking forward to visiting as soon as I can accommodate them in the new apartment." She nodded silently and left the room. I finished packing, carefully putting the last of my belongings into my second suitcase, then pulled out my cell phone and dialed Randall. "Rand, it's Pat. Remember when you offered me a place to stay at your place? Does that offer still stand?" "Of course it is, old boy. When can I expect you?" "How about right now?" A short pause followed. "What's the matter?" "I'll tell you when I meet you." Let's just say the situation reached a boiling point sooner than I expected. "Understood. Come over. I'll be home all day." I thanked my friend and ended the call. I then called a cab through the app. The car was due to arrive in 15 minutes. After looking around the room one last time, I made sure I hadn't forgotten anything and walked out into the hallway with 2 suitcases. Ethan was waiting for me at the front door. His face expressed a mixture of guilt, confusion, and annoyance. You're really leaving? Just like that. Not just like that, Ethan. After months of humiliation, manipulation, and trying to use me as an ATM machine, after your wife's ultimatum. That's not what she meant. Winnie's just emotional sometimes. You know what she's like. Yeah, now I really know what she's like. And you know what the saddest part is? It's not so much that I'm disappointed in her. After all, I didn't know her that well. But in you. Your mom and I taught you to stand up for yourself and your loved ones, to be honest and fair. What happened to that boy? Ethan lowered his eyes. You don't understand, Dad. I have a family, obligations. I can't just. I'm your family too, Ethan, I interrupted him. At least that's what I thought. A car horn sounded outside. A cab had arrived. I have to go, I said, picking up my suitcases. Wait, Ethan stepped forward. What about the money? Our arrangements? Are you just canceling everything? I looked at my son for a long moment. Even now, in the moment of goodbye, he was more concerned about the money than anything else. Evelyn would be so disappointed. Forget about the money, Ethan. I'm not going to fund your and Winnie's whims anymore. As for the grandchildren, I've set up a trust fund for them, money from which they can draw when they reach adulthood. Education, first homes, whatever they want. But neither you nor Winnie will be able to touch those funds. His face contorted with anger. You have no right to decide for my children. They're minors. I'm their guardian. That's why I set up the trust with an independent trustee, to protect the boy's interests. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a cab waiting for me. I walked past him toward the exit. On the porch, I turned around and asked, Don't you want to say goodbye to the boys? They're at school, Ethan muttered. Winnie dropped them off early today. Of course. Winnie made sure I didn't get to say goodbye to the grandkids. It was her little revenge. Tell them I love them and I'll call them tonight, I said, and headed for the cab. The driver helped me load my suitcases into the trunk, and soon we were on our way out of the neighborhood where I had spent the last months of my life. Strangely, I felt no sadness or regret, only relief and a quiet determination to start over. I stared out the window at the streets of Seaford floating by and thought about how strange life had gotten. Who would have thought that at 68 years old I would have to start from scratch? That the man I had raised and loved with all my heart would choose money over a father's love? But along with the bitterness of this realization came another realization. I am free, free from manipulation, from guilt, from having to live up to someone else's expectations. Now I could live for myself, by my own rules. And maybe that was the main lesson I needed to learn. The cab turned down the wide avenue that led to Randall's house. A new chapter of my life was beginning, and in spite of everything that had happened, I was ready for it. Randall Worth's house was in the old part of Seaford, in a neighborhood once inhabited by wealthy captains and shipowners. The Victorian mansions, with their spacious verandas and manicured gardens, looked as if time had slowed to a crawl. The cab stopped at the wrought iron gates of one of these houses, a 3-story building with a turret and many decorative elements. Randall was waiting for me on the porch. Despite his 72 years, he looked alert and fit, the result of the daily jogging and diet he bragged about every time we met. When he saw me, he smiled broadly and came down to help with the suitcases. Pat, old boy, you look like you've been chewed up and spit out. He hugged me tightly, patting me on the back. That's about how I feel, I grinned, enjoying the sincerity of that greeting after months of fake smiles at my son's house. We carried the suitcases into the house, and Randall led me into the guest room on the second floor. It was spacious, with large windows overlooking the garden, solid wooden furniture, and a private bathroom. Make yourself comfortable. Bathroom's over there. Towels are in the closet. When you're ready, come downstairs. I'll open a bottle of that scotch you like. Left alone, I slowly looked around. The room was 3 times the size of the one I'd borrowed from Ethan and Vinny, and decorated with impeccable taste. Randall always had a knack for creating beauty and comfort around him. After a quick shower, I changed and went downstairs, where my friend was already waiting with 2 glasses of amber liquid. Here's to new beginnings, he proclaimed, raising his glass. To freedom, I added, and we drank. The whiskey burned my throat with a pleasant warmth, and I felt the tension of the last few days gradually let go. Randall didn't rush me with questions, just sat beside me, letting me enjoy a moment of peace. Finally, I told him everything. The last conversation I'd had with Winnie, the ultimatum, my disappointment in my son, and my hasty departure. Damn, bitch, Randall muttered when I was done. Sorry, Pat. I know she's the mother of your grandchildren, but I have no other word for her. And Ethan always seemed like a wimp to me, to be honest. Even when he was a teenager, I noticed how easily he succumbed to other people's influence. Evelyn and I spoiled him too much, I sighed, always protecting him from the consequences of his actions, always giving him the best. We thought we were doing it out of love, but in reality, we raised a man who doesn't know how to appreciate what he has and doesn't understand what a real family means. Randall shook his head. Don't blame yourself. You were a good father. It's just that some people, regardless of upbringing, choose the path of least resistance. Ethan chose a wife who thinks for him, makes decisions for him, and is apparently responsible for him. In a way, that's a choice too. We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the past, discussing plans for the future. Randall insisted that I stay with him for as long as it took, but I was adamant. I needed my own space, my own home. Eventually, he agreed to help me move into a rented apartment, which was scheduled for Friday. I spent the next 2 days at Randall's house, recovering from everything that had happened and finalizing the financial transactions I had started. I contacted my bank and lawyer to make sure all my accounts were secure from any possible attempts by Ethan or Vinny to access them. My attorney confirmed that the trust fund for the grandchildren was properly set up, and under no circumstances would my parents be able to handle the money. On the evening of the first day, I called the grandchildren. Harvey answered the phone, and I heard a mixture of relief and concern in his voice. Grandpa, did you really leave us for good? No, kiddo, not for good. I'm just going to live somewhere else. But we'll definitely see each other. How are you and Hugo? How's school going? We talked for about half an hour. Harvey talked about his new science project. Hugo bragged about winning the school chess competition. They both seemed a little confused about me leaving, but not too upset. Kids are surprisingly quick to adapt to change. At the end of the conversation, I heard Vinny's voice demanding that the boys go to dinner, and the connection was cut off. On the second day, Randall took me to a furniture and appliance store. Although the apartment I rented was furnished, I wanted to add a few things that would make it truly mine. I picked out a comfortable leather reading chair, a few table lamps, a coffee machine, and other little things. Randall insisted that I take his old TV, which is still gathering dust in the attic and would outperform any newer model. Friday morning, we loaded all my stuff into Randall's spacious SUV and drove to my new apartment. It was in a 3-story red brick building near the center of town, in a quiet neighborhood with lots of cafes, small stores, and green squares. The apartment was on the second floor. Bright living room with large windows overlooking the quiet street, combined with a compact but functional kitchen. A bedroom with a built-in closet and a comfortable bed. A small second room, which I decided to turn into a study, and at the same time a guest room for the grandchildren. A bathroom with a shower stall and a small pantry where I could store suitcases and other rarely used items. Not bad, Randall nodded approvingly as he looked around the apartment. Much cozier than I expected. And the neighborhood is nice, quiet, but with a good infrastructure. You can walk to everything you need. We spent the day arranging furniture, unpacking, and connecting appliances. By late afternoon, the apartment was starting to look settled. I hung Evelyn's pictures on the walls, arranged the books on the shelves, organized the clothes in the closet. In the kitchen, I organized everything the way I'd become accustomed to over the years of married life. Spices to the right of the stove, mugs on an open shelf, kettle always at the ready. You know, Pat, Randall said when we finally sat down for a break with a bottle of beer, I admire you. Not everyone your age would have the strength to make a fresh start. I shrugged. What choice do I have? Continue to live in a toxic environment where I'm not respected or appreciated? No thanks. I'd rather spend the rest of my days alone but with dignity than surrounded by people who only see me as a walking ATM machine. And yet, he sipped his beer, not everyone would take that step. Many older people cling to family ties, even if those ties only bring them pain, because they're afraid of being alone. You chose a more difficult but more honorable path. After Randall left, I was alone in my new apartment. Night fell, and in the silence, I was suddenly acutely aware of the absence of the usual sounds. The children's laughter, Ethan's footsteps in the hallway, even Winnie's annoying voice giving orders. I sat in my new chair by the window, looking out at the lights of the city and trying to sort out my feelings. On the one hand, I was overwhelmed with a sense of freedom. For the first time in months, I could decide when to get up, what to eat, how to spend my day. No one left me to do lists, no one reprimanded me, no one tried to control my every move. I could listen to my favorite classical music without worrying that someone would find it old-fashioned and boring, as Winnie put it. On the other hand, I felt acutely lonely. After 45 years of marriage to Evelyn and then months of living in my son's noisy house, the silence of the empty apartment seemed deafening. I missed my grandchildren, their energy and spontaneity. Even Ethan I missed, or rather, the Ethan he used to be, before he let greed and weakness of character overshadow everything good about him. The first night in the new apartment was restless. It took me a long time to fall asleep, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the building, to the noise of passing cars, to the distant hum of a ship in the harbor. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of Evelyn. She stood in our old garden, among her favorite roses, and smiled at me. "You did the right thing, Patrick," she said. "Now live life to the fullest, for both of us." I woke up with my eyes wet with tears, but with a light heart, as if I had received a blessing on my new path. In the morning, I decided to start settling into the neighborhood, walked to the nearest cafe where I had a breakfast of fresh croissants and excellent coffee. Met the owner of a small bookstore on the corner, who turned out to be an avid lover of classic literature, just like me. Found a cozy park 2 blocks away from the house where I could sit on a bench watching the ducks in the pond and reading a book. The day flew by, and by evening I returned home with a sense of satisfaction. The apartment no longer seemed so empty and alien. I cooked myself a simple but delicious dinner, opened a bottle of good wine, and sat down in my new chair with a book. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home. The next day I took care of financial matters. Although I had already done most of the transactions, there were still some details that needed attention. I contacted the bank to make sure all my automatic payments were redirected to new accounts. Then I called the pension fund to update my contact information. Finally, and most importantly, I officially revoked all powers of attorney previously granted to Ethan and revoked his signature authority on any financial documents related to my assets. When everything was finalized, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the last thread tying me to the toxic situation at my son's house had been cut. Now I could really move on. That evening, Randall called me to make sure I was okay and to invite me to Sunday dinner. "Nothing special," he said, "just you and me and a couple of other old friends. We'll reminisce about our youth, talk about life." I gratefully accepted the invitation. The thought of spending time in the company of people with whom I shared memories and interests seemed very appealing. In the last few months of living with Ethan and Winnie, I had little opportunity to maintain old friendships. My sister-in-law always found a way to make it clear that my friends didn't fit into their social circle. On Sunday, I put on my best casual suit and went to Randall's. In addition to the owner of the house, there were two of our former colleagues, Morton Gray, with whom we had once started our careers at the same investment bank, and Oliver Preston, a former CFO of a large company, now, like all of us, enjoying a well-deserved vacation. The lunch was spent in an atmosphere of casual fun and nostalgia. We recalled amusing incidents from our professional lives, discussed the current economic situation, shared news about mutual acquaintances. No one asked directly about the reasons for my move, although I was sure Randall had already told them the main reasons. This tactfulness was especially nice after months of living with Winnie, who knew no boundaries of personal space. After lunch, when Morton and Oliver left, Randall and I were alone on the veranda, sipping whiskey and watching the sunset. "How are you?" he asked bluntly. "Better than I expected," I answered honestly. "Sure, the loneliness rolls in sometimes, especially in the evenings. But overall, I feel free, like I've shed the heavy load I've been dragging around all these months." Randall nodded. "It's okay to feel both the joy of freedom and the pain of loneliness at the same time. The main thing is, don't let the loneliness drive you back into a toxic relationship. Trust my experience. It's better to be alone than with people who don't respect you and your boundaries. I'm not going back, I said firmly. Even if Ethan comes on his knees and begs, some bridges are burned forever. And the grandchildren? Will you see them? I sighed. I hope so, if Vinny doesn't get in the way. I've already called them and invited them to visit next weekend. Ethan reluctantly, but agreed to bring them to my place. We'll see if he keeps his word. And if he doesn't? If they start using the kids as leverage, I wondered. The thought had crossed my mind before, and I discussed it with my lawyer. Legally, I have the right to see my grandchildren. And if need be, I will fight for that right through the courts. But hopefully it won't come to that. As much as Ethan has been hurt and cheated out of his financial expectations, I believe that somewhere deep down inside, he realizes how important a relationship with his grandfather is to the boys. Randall looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Instead, he changed the subject. Have you thought about what you're going to do now? I mean, besides reading books and feeding the ducks in the park? I grinned. Actually, yes, I have. I've been thinking about getting back into counseling. Not full time, of course, but a couple clients I could take on. A lot of people need sound investment advice right now, especially the elderly who don't trust young financiers with their cryptocurrencies and other newfangled stuff. Great idea, Randall perked up. I can help you with contacts. I still have connections at a few investment firms that are sometimes looking for experienced advisors to work with VIP clients. We talked for several more hours, discussing my possible part-time options. To my surprise, this prospect made me really enthusiastic. After retirement, and especially after Evelyn's death, I had somehow resigned myself to the idea that the active part of my life was over. But now, freed from toxic relationships and with a new living space, I suddenly felt empowered and eager to be useful again, to share my knowledge and experience. When I got home late at night, I sat down at my computer and started updating my professional resume. Despite the late hour, I felt a surge of energy and inspiration. For the first time in a long time, I thought about the future with optimism and anticipation rather than anxiety and fatigue. I spent the next few days settling into my new life, bought a bicycle to explore the neighborhood and keep fit, signed up at the local library where, to my delight, there were weekly book club meetings, found a small farmer's market that sold fresh fruits and vegetables, and developed a rapport with the vendors, who began to recognize me and greet me by name. Gradually, my apartment became more and more cozy and personalized. I hung pictures I had kept in boxes since selling the house, arranged souvenirs and memorabilia, and bought some indoor plants to liven up the space. I set up the second room as a study, with a comfortable desk and shelves for books. But I also put a fold-out couch in there for the grandchildren, and bought some board games that we loved to play with them. On Wednesday morning, as I was returning from a run, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and I answered with some wariness. Patrick Hungate here. Mr. Hungate, this is Beatrice Linden from the investment firm, Morgan and Associates. I was given your contacts by Randall Worth. He mentioned that you might be interested in a consulting position for our VIP clients. I was pleasantly surprised by Randall's promptness. We made an appointment for the next day, and I felt a slight excitement, almost like I had before a job interview when I was younger. Although I was financially secure through retirement and sound investments, the prospect of being part of a professional community again, applying my knowledge and experience, was very appealing. In the evening, I called my grandchildren to confirm our plans for the weekend. Ethan came to the phone, and his voice sounded strained. Hey, Dad, are you calling about the boys? Yeah, just wanted to make sure our arrangement for Saturday is still on track. A pause followed. About that, Vinny thinks it's too early for a visit. You just moved in. You probably haven't settled in properly yet. I felt a wave of anger rising inside, but held it back. Ethan, we had a deal. I had the boys' room specially prepared, bought the games they love. They told me themselves they were looking forward to this visit. I know, Dad, but Winnie is worried. What exactly is she worried about, Ethan? About me being able to spend time with my grandchildren without her supervision? Or about them seeing that I'm perfectly happy without you? Ethan sighed. Look, I'm trying to smooth things over. Maybe in a couple weeks when things have calmed down a bit. No, I said firmly. We made a deal for this Saturday and I insist on it. If you don't bring the boys, I'll come myself and pick them up. And if you or Vinny try to interfere, my lawyer will be very interested in the situation. Are you threatening me with a lawsuit? Ethan sounded disbelief in his voice. I'm reminding you of my rights as a grandfather and of your responsibilities as a father who should be thinking of the good of his children, not the whims of his wife. After another pause, Ethan reluctantly agreed to bring the boys over Saturday morning. I knew this battle was won, but the war for the right to see my grandchildren had just begun. Winnie is not one to give up easily, especially when her pride and greed are hurt. But now, looking at my new apartment, at my new life that I had built by my own rules and for myself, I felt ready for this battle. No longer would I let anyone, not Vinny, not even Ethan, dictate to me how to live my life or who to socialize with. This was my life, and I intended to live it with dignity and on my own terms. A week in my new apartment flew by. Every day I discovered something new in the neighborhood. A cozy cafe with homemade baked goods, a secondhand bookstore with old vinyl records, a park with chess tables where pensioners gathered for games and leisurely conversations. I visited the local public library and enrolled in a computer literacy course for seniors, not because I didn't know how to use a computer, but to expand my social circle. The meeting at the investment firm Morgan & Associates went even better than I expected. Beatrice Linden, an elegant woman in her 50s, turned out to be the daughter of one of my former colleagues, and we immediately hit it off. After a short interview, where she asked a few professional questions, more as a formality, we moved on to discussing the terms of cooperation. I was offered to consult 3 or 4 VIP clients, no more than 2 or 3 meetings a week, with the option to consult online or in the company's office at my discretion. Your experience and reputation speak for themselves, Mr. Hangate, Beatrice said as I signed the contract. I can't deny that it is a great stroke of luck for us that you have decided to return to active consulting work. I smiled modestly, but inside I felt a surge of pride. After months spent at Ethan and Vinny's house, where I was seen as a burden and a source of extra income, it was especially nice to feel professionally recognized and respected. Saturday brought a long-awaited meeting with my grandchildren. Ethan dropped them off at 10 a.m. sharp, as we had agreed. He looked tense and avoided a direct look as we exchanged greetings. Harvey and Hugo, on the other hand, were delighted. They looked around my new apartment curiously, gushed about the school news, and clearly enjoyed seeing me in good spirits. Are you coming to pick them up at 5? I asked Ethan as he was about to leave. Yes, he replied briefly. Winnie wanted me to pick them up earlier, but I insisted on our arrangement. I nodded, appreciating this small victory of a son over his wife's will. Thank you, Ethan. It's important to me. And for the boys. He paused for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but then just nodded and left. The day with the grandkids went great. We visited a nearby park where we fed the ducks and played frisbee. Then went to the very ice cream parlor I told them about, where the boys chose the biggest and most elaborate desserts on the menu. Back home, we had a board game tournament, and then I helped them with their math homework. To my surprise, the teacher assigned them a topic related to financial literacy, calculating interest in simple investment problems, and I was happy to share my knowledge, telling them much more than the school curriculum required. When Ethan came back for them, the boys begged him to let them stay longer, but he was adamant. Mom's expecting us for dinner, he said in a tone that brooked no objection. I noticed him tense up when Hugo asked, Can't Grandpa come to dinner with us? Not tonight, kiddo, I replied softly, not wanting to embarrass my son. I already have plans for tonight, but I'll definitely see you next weekend. As I saw them off, I had mixed feelings. Joy at spending time with my grandchildren and a slight sadness at parting. But overall, the day left a warm mark on my heart. The boys accepted my new home and new way of life without question or judgment, as only children can. And it gave hope that our relationship would continue despite the separation from their parents. On Sunday, I attended a computer literacy class where I met several interesting people my age. Particularly enjoyable was a conversation with Sylvia North, a former literature teacher, a widow like me, with a keen sense of humor and a broad outlook. We agreed to visit an impressionist exhibition together one day, which was to open at the local museum in a couple of weeks. Life was settling down, and I hardly thought about what was going on at Ethan and Winnie's house. But on Wednesday night, exactly a week after I left, my phone started ringing off the hook. Ethan called first, but I was in a meeting with my first client at the Morgan and Associates office and couldn't answer. This was followed by 3 more calls from his number and 2 from an unknown number that I assumed was Vinny's. I muted the phone to end the meeting without interruptions. When I left the office 2 hours later and checked my phone, there were already 10 missed calls and several messages. Ethan wrote, "Dad, we need to talk right away. Please call me back as soon as you can." Another message from an unfamiliar number was more demanding. "Patrick, this is Winnie. Contact us immediately. It's regarding our general financial matters." I grinned. So they'd finally discovered that the accounts were locked. I'd purposely timed it to coincide with Ethan's large monthly mortgage payment, which used to be partially covered by our joint account, plus the payments for the boys' private school, car insurance, and other regular expenses they'd grown accustomed to. Deciding not to rush my answer, I had a quiet dinner at a restaurant near the office, took a stroll through the evening city, and only when I got home around 9 p.m. dialed my son's number. Ethan answered after the first beep, as if he'd been sitting there with the phone in his hand. "Dad, finally, I've been trying to reach you all day." "I had an important business meeting," I replied calmly. "What's wrong, Ethan?" Judging by the number of calls, something serious happened. "Serious?" His voice trailed off into a shout. "You've blocked all of our joint accounts." The bank refused to accept the mortgage payment. The boys' school sent a notice of arrears. "What have you done?" "I just took care of my finances, Ethan, as you and Vinny have advised me repeatedly. Remember your lectures on financial responsibility? But we were counting on that money. We had a budget planned with your input. And this is after you practically kicked me out of the house? After Vinny's ultimatum? After you stood by and silently watched your wife humiliate your father?" Interesting logic, son. There was some fiddling in the receiver, and a moment later I heard Vinny's harsh voice. "Patrick, this is completely unacceptable. You can't just stop honoring your financial obligations to your family." "What obligations, Vinny?" "As I recall, it was you who insisted on my immediate eviction from the house. You gave me an ultimatum. Either I give you most of my money and continue to live under your control, or I leave. I chose the second option, and naturally took my money with me. But the mortgage, the boys' school, all those expenses, those are your expenses, Winnie. Not mine. You and Ethan have good salaries. You can well afford to pay for your lifestyle without my help. You may have to give up some excesses, but it will be a useful lesson in financial responsibility." I could almost physically feel her seething with rage on the other end of the line. "You can't do this to your own son and grandchildren. It's irresponsible and cruel." "Cruel?" I couldn't hold back a chuckle. "Vinny, let's remember who here was talking about the moral deterioration I was supposedly inflicting on your family by my presence? Who made daily household to do lists for me like a servant? Who discussed with my girlfriends how I was taking up space and not living up to expectations? And after all that, you accuse me of being cruel? It was a misunderstanding. We can talk things out, find a compromise. Ethan is very worried. The boys miss you." "Really? And a week ago, you were sure everyone would be better off without me. What's changed, Winnie? Don't tell me it's the money. We both know that's what it's all about." There was a fuss in the receiver again, and Ethan came back on the line. "Dad, please, let's talk calmly. I realize that Winnie and that we haven't always treated you right, but you can't solve problems that way. We're a family. We have to support each other." "Family?" I felt a wave of anger rising in me, but held back. "Ethan, you defined what family means to you when you let your wife kick me out the door. When you stood by and remained silent while she told me I either had to serve you and give you my money or leave. You made your choice then. Now live with the consequences. But what are we going to do about the payments? With the mortgage? With the boys' school? The same thing all responsible adults do. Budget according to income, not expectations. You have a good job, Ethan. Winnie has a good income from her online counseling business, too. You can support yourself and the kids quite well if you learn to live within your means." "You don't understand," there was desperation in his voice. We have huge mortgage payments. We took out an extra loan to renovate the kitchen last year. The boys' private school costs a fortune. We, we were counting on your help. And I counted on your support when your wife made my life hell. See how it turns out? We're both disappointed. Silence ensued. I could almost see Ethan sitting with his head down, not knowing what to say. Finally, he spoke softly. Maybe, maybe we should meet. Talk face to face. I could come see you tomorrow. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to back out immediately. The memories of my son's betrayal were too fresh. But the other part, the part that had always seen Ethan as the little boy Evelyn and I had lovingly raised, wanted to give him a chance to explain himself. Okay, I finally said. 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, at my place. Come alone, without Winnie. Thanks, Daddy. The relief in his voice was almost palpable. I'll be there. After the conversation, I sat in my chair for a long time, looking out the window at the nighttime city. A strange sense of contentment was mixed with sadness. I took no joy in Ethan and Vinny's panic. After all, they were still my family no matter how badly they treated me. But I was glad I'd done what I had to do, protected myself and my dignity, showed that I wasn't to be treated like an ATM machine on legs. Before I went to bed, I reread the last letter from Randall, who had gone to New York for a week on business. Hold firm, Pat, he wrote. Don't let them manipulate you again. They are trying to use your love for your grandchildren and your fatherly feelings for Ethan as leverage. Don't give in. I woke up this morning with a firm decision to stick to my position, regardless of what Ethan said or suggested. I spent the first half of the day doing the usual things. I went grocery shopping, prepared lunch, reviewed materials for an upcoming consultation with a new client. Shortly before 2, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and took out an apple pie from the refrigerator, bought from a local bakery. Ethan always loved sweets. At exactly 2, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood on the doorstep, looking tired and anxious. There were dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept all night. I silently let him into the apartment. Nice place, he said, looking around. Cozy. Thanks, I like it here. Coffee? He nodded, and I led him into the kitchen, where the cups were already prepared and the pie sliced. We sat down at the table, and for a while we just drank coffee in silence. Finally, Ethan spoke up. Dad, I want to apologize for the way Vinny and I treated you. It was wrong. I looked at him carefully, trying to determine how sincere his words were. What exactly was wrong, Ethan? He looked slightly embarrassed. Well, the way Winnie was making you to do lists, and the way she talked about your finances, and the ultimatum, it was all too much. And your acquiescence to all of it? Your inability to protect your father from humiliation. Was that too much too? Ethan lowered his eyes. Yes, I should have intervened. Should have stopped her. Yeah, I'm sorry to you. I remained silent, giving him a chance to continue. He twirled the cup in his hands nervously, picking his words. You see, Winnie, she's a very strong person. Always knows what she wants and how to get it. Yeah, I'm not like that. It's easier for me to agree than to argue, especially when it comes to money and planning. She's better at those things. Or you just let her think that, I pointed out. Ethan, I've been teaching you financial literacy since you were a kid. You grew up in a family that respected money and knew how to handle it. Don't tell me you didn't realize what was going on when Winnie demanded more and more from me. He sighed. I did understand. Of course I understood. But we really needed the extra funds. The house, the cars, the boys' school. All of it cost a lot. And then there were new plans. The lake house, expanding the house. Winnie was so fired up about these ideas, and I couldn't say no to her. Even if the cost was your father and his dignity? Ethan didn't answer, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. I sipped my coffee, giving him time to gather his thoughts. What do you want, Ethan? Why did you come? He looked up at me. I want us to be a family again. For you to come home. I shook my head. No, Ethan. I'm never going back to that house. And to be honest, that's not what you came for. You came to ask for money. He flinched as if I'd punched him. No, Dad, I really want you back. The boys miss you, and so do I. And Winnie, does she miss me too? Or my money? Ethan fell silent, unable to find an answer. I continued to listen, son. I appreciate you coming over to apologize, I really do. But I'm not going back to a house where I'm not respected or valued as a person. I have created a new life for myself here. I have an apartment that I like, a job that is fulfilling, new friends and acquaintances. I am free and happy for the first time in a long time. But what about us? What about the boys? The boys will always be a part of my life. I love them and will support them in every way I can. They can come to visit me and I will be happy to see them. As for you and Winnie, you will have to learn to live within your means, as all responsible adults do. But Dad, we can't. We have huge debts that we can't pay off without your help. This is it, I thought. We're finally getting to the bottom of this. What debts exactly, Ethan? He reluctantly began to list. A mortgage on a house, a loan for a kitchen remodel, 2 car loans, credit cards with impressive balances. The list was long and impressive. It looked like she and Vinny had been living beyond their means for a long time, counting on my financial support. And how much do you need to cover the most urgent payments? I asked when he was done. Ethan named an amount that nearly made my jaw drop. It was more than I'd already given them in the months I'd lived in their house. Ethan, this is crazy. I'm not giving you that kind of money. It won't solve the problem. It will only delay it. You and Winnie need to seriously rethink your lifestyle and financial habits. But what are we going to do? We could lose the house. The boys will have to be transferred to public school. And what's so scary about that? Millions of people live in more modest homes and attend public schools. It's not the end of the world, Ethan. He looked like I was suggesting he move to live under a bridge. You don't understand. Winnie would never agree to that. She's talking about divorce if we don't solve the financial problems. I looked at my son carefully. And that scares you? The possibility of breaking up with a woman who only values you as a source of income? She's the mother of my children, he said quietly. And I love her no matter what. I sighed. What could I possibly say to that? If Ethan truly loved Winnie, with all her flaws, who was I to judge him? After all, love isn't always logical and rational. Listen, Ethan, I won't give you the amount you're asking for. That would be irresponsible of me, like giving an alcoholic a bottle of whiskey. But I can offer other help. I can pay directly for the boys' tuition at their school, not for you and Winnie, but for them. And I can advise you on how to restructure your debts and come up with a realistic financial plan. Ethan looked disappointed, but also grateful at the same time. Thank you, Dad. That's something. But Vinny will have to put up with it, or not get over it and draw your own conclusions. Either way, it's already your relationship, which I'm not going to interfere with. We talked for another hour or so. I explained to Ethan the steps they could take to improve their financial situation, from refinancing their mortgage, to selling one of their cars, to cutting back on entertainment and restaurant expenses. He listened intently, taking notes on his phone and asking questions. At moments, I saw glimpses of the smart, sensible boy that Evelyn and I had once raised, and it gave me a faint hope that all was not lost. As he was leaving, I asked, "Are you going to tell Winnie about our conversation? About the fact that I agreed to pay for the boys' school, but won't give you money to pay off your other debts?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, it won't be an easy conversation, but I have to be honest with her, and maybe it's time for me to start taking a more active role in our family decisions." I didn't comment on this belated epiphany, just shook his hand in farewell. "Good luck, son. And remember, the boys are always welcome to come visit me. I love them and would love to see them." After Ethan left, I sat in my chair for a long time, reflecting on our conversation. I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction at his admitting his mistakes and asking for help. Only the sadness of realizing how far we had drifted apart and how much my son had changed under the influence of his wife. But at the same time, I was calm and confident in my decision. I didn't give in to emotional blackmail. I didn't let guilt or paternal love cloud my judgment. I set clear boundaries and stuck to them. And maybe in the long run, that would benefit not only me, but Ethan and even Winnie, if she could learn from this situation. That evening, I got a call from Randall in New York. "So, old boy, how was the meeting with the prodigal son?" I told him about our conversation with Ethan, his apology and request for financial assistance, my decision to pay only for my grandchildren's school. Good for you, Randall approved. You did the right thing. If you had given them the full amount they asked for, they would have come back in a couple months with their hand out again. Some people never learn to live within their means if they're constantly being helped. I know, I sighed, but it's still hard to see your own child make mistakes that could cost them, their family, and their well-being. It's part of growing up, Pat. Even if it comes at 40, sometimes people need to fall to learn how to get up on their own. It had been an unusually warm and sunny summer in Seaford. It had been 3 months since I had left my son's house, and my new life had taken on a clear shape and rhythm. Each morning began with a light jog along the boardwalk or, on rainy days, with calisthenics led by a trainer from an online program for seniors. This was followed by a hearty breakfast, reading the morning news and planning the day. 3 days a week, I counseled clients at Morgan and Associates. Beatrice was pleased with my work and recently offered to expand my clientele, but I declined. I like the current balance between work and personal time. I spent 2 more days on community activities. I volunteered at the local library where I helped conduct financial seminars for young people and joined a group of retirees cleaning and beautifying a city park. Weekends were usually spent with his grandchildren. After our conversation, Ethan, to his credit, did not interfere with my interaction with the boys. Every Saturday he brought them to me, and we spent the whole day together. We went to museums and exhibitions, played in the park, cooked dinner together, watched educational movies. Sometimes I would take them for the whole weekend, and then we could go on a little field trip to neighboring towns or just spend Sunday mornings tossing bread to the ducks in the pond and discussing schoolwork. With Winnie, I hardly ever socialized at all. She always found an excuse not to accompany Ethan when he dropped off or picked up the boys. And if I had to talk to her on the phone, she limited herself to formal phrases. I was fine with that. The less interaction with this woman, the better. My social life was getting better too. My friendship with Randall grew even stronger, and we met regularly to play chess or go to the jazz club that had recently opened downtown. Through computer courses, I met several interesting people with whom I now met regularly at coffee shops to discuss books and movies. A particularly enjoyable relationship was with Sylvia North, a former literature teacher. After a visit to an Impressionist exhibition, we began to meet regularly. We went to the theater, to concerts, just walking around the city, discussing everything in the world. She was an intelligent, well-read woman with a subtle sense of humor and a calm character. In her company, I felt easy and free, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "You know, Patrick," she said one day as we sat in a cafe after a theater performance, "you're an amazing person. After everything you've been through, the loss of your wife, the betrayal of your son, you've retained your openness to the world and your ability to enjoy life. That's a rare gift," I smiled. "I think it's just an instinct for self-preservation. If I let bitterness and resentment take over, I'd turn into a grouchy old man that everyone avoids. And I still want to live life to the fullest. And you're doing a great job of it." Sylvia touched my arm gently. There was a warmth and understanding in her eyes that warmed my soul. Our relationship with Sylvia had developed slowly and naturally, without rush or pressure. We were both widowers, both valued our independence, but also enjoyed each other's company. It was a mature, relaxed feeling based on mutual respect and common interests. In July, Harvey and Hugo finished the school year with excellent grades, and I decided to give them a special gift, a week-long trip to an educational camp for gifted children in the mountains. The camp program included classes in robotics, science, and creative thinking, anything that would interest my inquisitive grandchildren. The cost was quite impressive, but I considered it an investment in their future. When I suggested the idea to Ethan, he looked confused. "Dad, that's very generous of you, but I'm not sure the boys are ready to spend a whole week away from home." "They're not toddlers anymore, Ethan. At their age, it's good to have new experiences, meet different people, learn independence." He sighed. "It's not just that. Winnie and I, we're going through a rough patch right now. I'm not sure this is the right time to make these decisions." I looked at my son carefully. He had visibly grayed over the past few months, with dark circles under his eyes and more gray in his hair. What's going on, Ethan? The financial problems haven't resolved? He shook his head. We're trying. Really trying. I took your advice. We refinanced the mortgage, sold the second car, cut back on entertainment. But it's not enough. The house is too big and too expensive for us. We, we've decided to sell it. This news didn't come as a big surprise to me. I had expected something like this, knowing the size of their debts and Vinny's inability to temper his appetites. And where do you plan to move to? Haven't decided yet. We're looking for something smaller and cheaper, maybe in a different neighborhood. Winnie's not happy, of course, but she realizes there's no choice. And how did the boys take the news? Ethan smiled weakly. Surprisingly well. They're more worried about having to change schools than the move itself. Speaking of which, does your offer to pay their tuition still stand? Of course, I nodded. I gave my word and I'll keep it. The boys will stay in their school no matter where you live. The relief on Ethan's face was almost palpable. Thank you, Dad. It means a lot to us. To them. So what about camp? I returned to the original topic. I need to make reservations ahead of time if we decide to send them there. Ethan hesitated. Let's ask the boys themselves. If they want to go, I won't object. And I'll try to convince Winnie. When I suggested the idea to Harvey and Hugo, they reacted enthusiastically. They were especially excited about the possibility of building their own robot and programming it to do simple tasks. Even Winnie, after some hesitation, agreed to let her sons go to camp, although she noted over the phone that it's very convenient for Patrick to be generous in some ways and stingy in others. The week while the boys were at camp was unusually quiet. I missed our Saturday meetings, but was glad they were gaining new experiences and knowledge. Daily photo reports from the camp organizers showed that the grandsons were having a great time, building robots, participating in science experiments, hiking in the scenic surroundings. On Thursday of that week, on my way home from the Morgan and Associates office, I noticed a familiar figure sitting on the bench outside my house. Ethan. He looked depressed and nervous, rubbing some paper in his hands. Ethan? Is something wrong? I asked, stepping closer. He flinched and looked up. Dad, he said, I've been waiting for you. We need to talk. I invited him into the apartment and we settled into the living room. Ethan declined the offered coffee and got straight to the point, holding out the paper he was holding to me. This is a preliminary agreement to sell the house. We found a buyer, and the deal should go through in a month. I took a quick look at the document. The price was below market value, but that was expected in Ethan's current situation. He needed to sell quickly. Have you found a new place to live yet? He nodded. A small townhouse on the eastern edge of town. Not as upscale a neighborhood as our current one, but decent, and most importantly, within our budget. Winnie's okay with moving there? Ethan averted his gaze. Not really. She left me, Dad, 2 weeks ago. Said she didn't marry me to live in a cage on the outskirts and that I didn't live up to her expectations. I was shocked, though somewhere deep inside I had expected something like that. Winnie had always valued material goods above human relationships. I'm sorry, son. I really am. What about the boys? They're living with me for now. Winnie is at her sister's in Portland right now, taking a break to think about the future, as she put it, but I'm afraid she might file for divorce and try to take the kids. Does she have any chance of getting full custody? Ethan shrugged. I don't. She's a mother, and the courts often side with mothers. The kids are with me now, though, and I can prove that I provide a stable environment and take care of them. Plus, Winnie has always been more focused on her career than raising boys. I reflected. The thought that my grandchildren might be under Winnie's complete control was unsettling. Have you consulted an attorney? Not yet. It all happened so suddenly, and now I barely have enough money to cover my daily expenses, let alone pay for a good family law attorney. I made my decision instantly. I'll help you with that. Not for you or Vinny, but for the boys. They deserve stability and a loving family, even if their parents decide to split up. The gratitude in Ethan's eyes was genuine. Thank you, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without your support. But understand, I continued, that doesn't mean I've forgotten or forgiven the way you and Winnie treated me. I'm only helping you with legal support for the sake of my grandchildren. Our personal relationship is a separate issue. Ethan lowered his head. I understand, and I don't expect you to ever fully forgive me. I acted like the ultimate coward and selfish. Allowed my wife to manipulate me and betrayed my own father. Such things are not forgotten. We sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, the sunset was beginning to set, coloring the room in warm orange tones. Finally, Ethan spoke again. You know, these months have taught me a lot. It was like I woke up from a long sleep and saw what my life had become. An endless pursuit of status and material possessions we couldn't afford. The constant fear of disappointing Winnie, of not living up to her expectations. I lost myself in that relationship, lost all the values you and Mom taught me. I listened intently to my son, seeing glimpses of the boy Evelyn and I had once raised. And how do you feel now that Winnie is gone? He hesitated. Oddly enough, mostly relief. Of course there's fear for the future, especially for the boys. But there's also a sense of freedom, of being able to start over, this time the right way. I nodded. It was a feeling I knew well, the same one I'd experienced when I'd left their house 3 months ago. Dad, Ethan looked me straight in the eye. I know some bridges are burned forever, but can we try to build new ones? Not for my sake, but for the boys. They need their grandfather, especially now that their family is falling apart. I pondered his words for a long time. Part of me was still hurt by my son's betrayal, his inability to protect me from Winnie's humiliation. But another part saw him as a man who had finally begun to realize his mistakes and was trying to change. We can try, I finally answered. I can't promise things will be the same. Too much has happened, but for the boys' sake, I'm willing to step up. The relief on Ethan's face was almost palpable. Thank you, Dad. That's more than I deserve. The next day, I contacted my attorney and asked him to recommend a good family law specialist for Ethan. Then I called the camp to see how the grandchildren were doing. The camp director assured me that the boys were feeling great and were fully immersed in the educational program. Your grandsons are very talented, Mr. Hungate, he said. Harvey in particular is showing amazing aptitude for programming. You should seriously consider developing that talent. Those words got me thinking. If Harvey is truly gifted in the field of technology, it would be wrong not to support his interest. I decided to discuss with Ethan the possibility of additional classes for the boy after he returned from camp. The week flew by quickly, and the day had come for Ethan to pick up the boys from camp. I offered to ride along with him, and he gratefully agreed. During the 2-hour drive to the mountains, we talked a lot about plans for the future, about raising the boys, about the values that are important to instill in them. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my son and I were really connecting, not just exchanging formal phrases. Harvey and Hugo were excited about camp and talked excitedly about their adventures and accomplishments. Harvey proudly showed off the little robot he had built and programmed himself, and Hugo showed off the rock samples he had collected during the scientific expedition. They were so engrossed in their stories that they hardly noticed the tension between their father and me. On the drive home, the boys fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the experience and saying goodbye to their new friends. Ethan and I drove in silence, each immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, he broke the silence. Dad, I want you to know that no matter what happens between me and Vinny, I will do everything I can to make sure the boys grow up happy and confident, and that they always know what a great grandpa they have. I nodded, touched by his words. I believe you, Ethan, and I'll always be there to support you and the boys. That's a promise. A month later, Ethan and the boys moved into a townhouse on the eastern edge of town. Winnie, as expected, filed for divorce, but with the help of a good lawyer, Ethan was able to get joint custody of the children. The boys spent most of their time with their father and weekends with their mother, who rented an apartment near her office downtown. I helped Ethan set up his new home, bought the boys computers for school, and enrolled Harvey in additional programming classes. I also increased the amount in my grandchildren's trust fund to provide them not only an education, but a head start in adulthood. Ethan was grateful for the help, although sometimes I noticed a shadow of shame in his eyes. He still remembered how he had let his greed and weakness of character ruin our relationship. My relationship with Sylvia was growing too. We began to spend more and more time together, and in August I invited her to dinner with Randall and his new friend Eleanor. The evening went splendidly, and as Randall walked us out, he whispered to me, "She's wonderful, Pat. Don't miss your chance for happiness." In September, when the boys were back at school and life had fallen into its usual rhythm, I often reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought me to my present position. Only 6 months ago, I had been humiliated and abused in my own son's house, cornered by my daughter-in-law's ultimatum. And today I was living a full, fulfilling life, with an interesting job, new relationships, strong friendships, and a good relationship with my grandchildren. One evening, sitting with Sylvia on the veranda of her house watching the sunset, I shared these thoughts. "You know," I said, "sometimes you have to lose something to gain so much more. Sometimes you have to walk away to keep yourself." She squeezed my hand gently. "And sometimes you have to have the courage to take that step." I smiled, looking up at the setting sun, coloring the sky in shades of gold and purple. Life went on with its ups and downs, joys and sorrows. But now I knew firmly, never again would I let anyone, not my son, not my daughter, in-law, not my daughter, in-law, not anyone else, dictate to me how to live my life or how to be happy. This is my journey, and it's up to me to decide which roads to take and with whom to share that journey. In the end, Vinny's ultimatum turned out to be the best thing that has happened to me in recent years. He made me remember my own worth, my right to respect and dignity. He forced me to take a step I might never have taken on my own, to start a new chapter of life at an age when many people are already putting a stop to it. And for that, strangely enough, I was grateful to her.